When most people think about Nebraska, they think of wide open spaces, prairies, and cropland. And while much of Nebraska is covered by these habitats, a small spot in the northwest corner of the state is very different. This area, known as the Pine Ridge, is covered with rocky escarpments or bluffs and plenty of pine trees. If you were to hike through this area, you would see bluffs that rise 5,000 feet and rock towers that rise out of the ground. Surrounding these rocky outcrops, you'll find pine trees, and lots of them. Between the stands of pines, you will find areas of short, scraggly plants. So in the middle of a prairie state, why do we find pine trees in this small area? Or why haven't these pine trees spread to other parts of the state? The answer to this question goes back about 20,000 years. At that time, much of North America was covered by glaciers, really, really thick ice. As these glaciers retreated or melted to the north, northern Nebraska was no longer covered in ice, but it was still really cold. The only plants that were adapted to surviving this cold climate were spruce and pine trees. As time went on and the temperatures continued to warm in Nebraska, most of the pines and spruce trees did not survive. In areas north of Nebraska that still had cold temperatures, like Canada, the spruce and pines still remained. This is the region we now know as the boreal forest in Canada. Back in Nebraska, the pine and spruce trees were replaced by prairie plants that thrived in the hot, dry conditions. These prairie plants are now what we see both in the shortgrass prairie and sandhill regions of Nebraska. But we haven't answered the question, why do we still have pine trees in this area of northern Nebraska? This rough terrain makes it hard for large grazing animals like bison and elk to traverse the land. Historically, we would have seen bison and elk on the prairie areas, but they would have avoided trying to climb in this area. So what if bison and elk don't climb mountains? How would that impact what plants grow in the area? Well, bison and elk don't have hands to scratch their back. Instead, they like to rub on trees. Rubbing on a tree is a great way to reduce irritation and itching from insects. This rubbing often causes damage to larger trees and kills small trees just starting to grow. Over time, trees were eliminated from areas with large bison or elk populations. Today we see this phenomenon in prairie areas with domestic herds. Grazing animals, bison, elk, deer, help keep prairies free of trees. Without these species roaming in the rocky areas of the Pine Ridge, the trees were free to grow. But that's not the only reason we see pine trees in the Pine Ridge. Fire also plays a role in what plants live where. Fire has been part of the ecology of Nebraska's habitats for thousands of years. Because trees are not well adapted or designed to survive fires, a wildfire usually prevents trees from growing in an area. But in the Pine Ridge, the rocky outcrops and tall bluffs make it hard for fires to burn and spread. Plus, in the valleys between the tall bluffs, moisture would have made it hard for fires to burn too hot. So in the shortgrass prairies and sandhills which surround the Pine Ridge, fire played an important role in preventing the pine trees from spreading. But in the Pine Ridge, the large bluffs prevented the fire from killing the pines. So now that we know why the Pine Ridge ecosystem is able to thrive in northwest Nebraska, let's dive into what lives in this unique ecosystem. In addition to pines, the area hosts several other plant species. One that's especially interesting is the mountain mahogany. This shrub grows to be 8 to 20 feet tall. It's snarly and twisted and has a woody trunk with no leaves on the bottom. The coolest part of this plant is the seeds. The small seeds have a long feathery tail attached. This fluffy tail helps disperse or spread the seeds in the wind. The tail is also curved like a corkscrew. When the seed lands on the ground, the corkscrew shape allows the tail to twist its way into the ground. This exceptional adaptation helps ensure more seeds are able to germinate and grow into new trees. But what about fire? Even in the Pine Ridge, fires do occasionally come through. When fire scorches a mountain mahogany, the above-ground portions of the plant may die, but the roots start growing new shoots almost immediately. A close look at the ponderosa pine reveals it too is well adapted to fire. Although large, really hot fires can kill small ponderosas, the thick, cork-like bark of mature or old trees help it withstand most fires. Plus, ponderosa pines lose their lower limbs or branches on purpose. This in turn means small fires can't jump into the higher branches and burn the whole tree. One animal species that's well adapted to the pine ridge and the ponderosa pine is the red crossbill. This small songbird has a bill or beak that is crossed, hence the name. The crossed bill helps it pry open pine cones. Then it uses its tongue to remove the seeds. Other birds found in the pine ridge include the rock wren and lots of species of woodpeckers. The pine ridge is also home to some distinct mammals. Bighorn sheep, mountain lions, and porcupines all call this area home. And don't forget about reptiles. The rocky conditions of the pine ridge are perfect for prairie lizards and bull snakes. Nebraska may not be home to glaciers anymore, but the impacts of that cold climate can still be seen today. The Pine Ridge is a fantastic example of how both climate and geology drive the living communities in an area.